Hi everyone, welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the pre-show for episode 3 of House of the Dragon. Just me today, no guest. My bad, I'm just very disorganized. I'll have guests back on again from next time, so don't worry about that. But I thought what we'd do is we'd use this as an opportunity just to make it as open a Q&A as possible. I've, as I always do, got questions from my patrons that I'm going to be working my way through, but I'd like to pick up as many questions in the chat as we go as well. I've been really enjoying this so far. It's been everything I've been hoping for all this time, to be honest. So I'm really excited for the rest of the season. But do let me know what you think. I will kick off with question, which is one that I would love to throw to the chat just to get us going, because one of the key things that one of the main things that I've been really enjoying about this so far is the slightly expanded lore, extra different angles on things that we know come from George R.R. Martin, and he's just fed them into this just to add a little bit extra to what we've got. We're not just retelling the story of what's in Fire and Blood. George R. R. Martin was very keen to sort of add in a few extra elements. So I'll go straight to the question, which is from Emma Shyman, which is saying, "Hi, Robert. My question is about something we learn about Old Valyria from Viserys and how this new information affects the current story. Viserys says that in Old Valyria, the Dragon Riders lived closest to the volcano because that was where their power was most potent. We know that dragons are happier on Dragonstone, but does this also mean that Targaryens on Dragonstone are more powerful than those in King's Landing? I'm loving all the new additions to Valyrian lore." So this was a question that I had and I picked up, actually, I think in my breakdown video, but I would love to know what you think in the chat, because this is left open-ended. I'll give a few introductory thoughts in just a moment, but what do you think? Do you think that this means that Targaryens are more powerful in Dragonstone? And if so, what does that actually mean? Do they still have this kind of magic? The only sort of real bits of magic we often see from Targaryens are things like, obviously, the dragon bonding, but also the dragon dreams. But people like Viserys seem to be having dragon dreams even in King's Landing. And the Targaryens, all through this age, continue to have dragon dreams. So it doesn't seem to be getting rid of that. My take is that there is some lost knowledge, first of all. So this was the source of their magic and power. We're told the Dragon Riders came from the source of the volcano. First of all, the first element, I think there is some kind of lost knowledge going on here. The Valyrians in Valyria knew stuff that the Targaryens now do not know. Second, I think that George R.R. Martin likes to keep these things vague. This is something that he said again and again. The History of Westeros interview quite recently, he talked about this from a number of different angles, about how he likes the idea of magic being mysterious, of us not being able to just completely codify it. The moment you codify it, and the moment you say exactly A plus B plus C equals this end result over here, that's the moment that it becomes less scary. So I think my gut instinct is he's probably not actually worked his way all through this, but liked this thought. Thirdly, this may have come, although it will have, I'm sure, got a tick from George R.R. Martin, this may have come initially from Ryan Congel. So that's just a few initial thoughts, but I'd love to know what you're thinking. Chase is saying, or would people who go to and return from Valyria now get some extra boost on magic and power like Euron? Well, that's an interesting take. But the Valyrian Peninsula has exploded. That's what the Doom of Valyria basic was. There were 14 flames, 14 of these volcanoes. Central Valyrian city seems to have been built into on the side of one of those volcanoes, but all of them seem to have exploded, and that just destroyed the entire peninsula. So are they volcanoes anymore? I'm not so sure. So probably not, but there must be some kind of magical residue of some kind, I would have thought. There certainly seem to be creatures there. One of the scariest stories in Fire and Blood was when we had Princess Aeria getting on the back of Balerion the Black Dread, flying over, we're pretty sure, to Valyria and coming back, and Balerion the Black Dread, the greatest, mightiest dragon in the world, came back really badly wounded, huge gouge marks in its side. From what? Something that's in Old Valyria. So there are magical creatures going on there that are very strong. Oh, actually, while I'm just thinking of it, this is, as all of my live streams are during the series and also the series of the Rings of Power, my pre-show live streams are charity live streams. So it's all in aid of Alzheimer's care and research. If Alzheimer's has ever touched your life, the life of your loved ones, you'll know that it's a horrible, horrible disease. So if you have some spare money, if you would like to either just donate to a good cause or sort of show some gratitude for the show, or just show some thanks to me, this is the way I'd love you to do it, is just to give to this charity. So there will be a link there where you would, somewhere below the super chat, if you're watching this live, where the super chat used to be, there is a donate button. That is the best way to do that. Thank you. And we've waged $2,200 already over the 3 pre-show live streams I've done so far. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you very much. Let's have a quick flick through. Nicola Jurican asking, is Melisandre alive at the time of the show? Probably, yes. She was very old. In fact, even the actress, Carice Van Houten, the actress, did point this out on Twitter, that Melisandre was probably alive during this time, so maybe she could show up. I loved the idea. I was joking when I had Joe Magician on a couple of weeks ago. I was joking with him about this this idea of maybe we could have her just appear in the background of a scene somewhere in King's Landing in the crowd, or maybe even some, like a character like Alice Rivers. That would be absolutely amazing. I don't think they're going to do that. I think that that's just a little bit of fun speculation. But yes, she is alive at this point in time. Stannis Baratheon asking what I'm expecting from Vaymond Velaryon. Okay, so he's a character who was he's in the books, but they've made him close. He's now, I think, the brother of Corlys Velaryon on the show. So I have a feeling they're going to make him the sort of the representation of House Velaryon, by which I mean Corlys Velaryon is a very clear character in and of his own right. He's got his own aims. He's got his own sort of drives. Rhaenys, clearly, as a dragon rider, as a Targaryen, is a separate thing. And the two children, Laena and Laenor, are also very clear in how they have their own distinct character arcs. Vaymond can therefore come to the fore as just being, this is House Velaryon. This is a person from the house who could be speaking for the needs and wants of House Velaryon. I think that's what they're going to be doing. I don't think this is going to be a tier 1 character. I think this is like a tier 3 character. They did this quite a lot on Game of Thrones, as you'd have a character who can be sort of like the representative of a group, and you might not even know that person's name. So, for example, in the last couple of seasons with the Dothraki, there was one leader person of the Dothraki who was just there and around, and Daenerys would give orders to. So I have a feeling that they'll just use him as being this sort of figurehead. Natalia Henrik talking about blood magic. Yes, so this was the other thing which Viserys talked about, is the blood magicians. So we have fire magic in Old Valyria, which is what the Dragon Lords seem to be using, and blood magic, which seemed to be a separate place that this was done, and there were blood magicians. So fire and blood may well be the Targaryen house words, but blood magic is this specific and separate type of magic to the fire magic that the Dragon Lords seem to be using. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Mara Lee, for the donation. Thank you, everyone who's been donated donating to this. Taylor Hughes, do you think the Mad King will be born at the end of the show? Well, so this is the... in terms of what we're going to be getting from the show, we've got this arc of the Dance of the Dragons. After they've finished the arc of the Dance of the Dragons, and we don't know how long that's going to be, I hope 4 seasons, inclusive of the one we've got at the moment, but there were mutters of maybe 3. After that, the idea is, Ryan Conkle has said this on a red carpet a while ago, to move to another story from the time of the Targaryens. So Aegon's invasion, for example. These have to be things that George R. R. Martin has written about. So things in the early period of Targaryen rule, or possibly right at the very end of it. Whether George R. R. Martin will want them to be going right up at the very end of it, I do not know, but I think we can certainly expect something like Aegon's invasion, and then hope they'll probably be hoping he might have written Fire and Blood Part 2 by then, and they could go to something like the Blackfire Rebellions. So will the Mad King be born at the end of this? If they do have this as this kind of long, many season long work through the Targaryen history, then yes, probably that would be the point at which they would end it, or possibly with Robert's Rebellion. That would be a good point. If they're covering Fire and Blood Part 2, the implication, I think, is that Fire and Blood Part 2 will go up to Robert's Rebellion, and then the Targaryens are gone. Hopelope, what do you think about the fact that HBO has confirmed that Crabfeeder has grayscale? Well, I think this is a great little addition here. So you can see Crabfeeder has got sort of bits of grayscale on his face. Now, how does that make a difference? Is it just making the character slightly cooler? Well, yes. But also, what we know about grayscale is that this sort of it spreads. Obviously, it sort of calcifies or petrifies your flesh, turning it to stone, and so slowly but surely it starts restricting your movements. And you'll have seen from the few shots we've had that Crabfeeder does seem to have a sort of slow, jerky kind of movements, is slightly awkward banging in of the sort of the hammer. So that, I think, works well and looks good. But also what grayscale tends to do, first of all, it's a death sentence for pretty much everybody. And so this is a person that in terms of motivations, this person actually doesn't care so much if they live or die, because they're going to die quite soon anyway. And then secondly, grayscale can and does at some point, it starts affecting the brain. So once it starts affecting your brain, that can then start to lead to slightly odd decision making, let's put it that way, and that can perhaps explain why he does this strange thing about putting all of his defeated foes, staking them out there for the crabs to eat. That is an odd thing. Yes, even in George R. R. Martin's world, that is a slightly odd thing to be doing, which is how he got his nickname, and perhaps that explains it in some way. So that would be my my guess. I don't think there's more to it than that, but we'll see. Maybe the show will sort of give us a bit of a curveball on that one. Alex Smith saying donations are not available in my country via the chat button. Is there another way to donate? Yeah, I think one of the moderators I gave a link to a while ago. Perhaps they could pop that into the chat again. I meant to put that into the description. Apologies for that. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee. Would be interesting to see if any other members of House Targaryen had dragon dreams. What role do you see dragon dreams moving forward in this show? We know it was important to the king, but how do you see this playing out for the rest of the show? So dragon dreams is another one of these things which have been added in, is probably the way to say this. They've always been a part of George R. R. Martin's Targaryen lore. Some Targaryens have always had these dragon dreams, true dreams. They escaped the Doom of Valyria because Daenerys the Dreamer had a dream about it and got them all out and over to Dragonstone, and that's how they survived that. What has happened for the show is we get two new people confirmed as being dragon dreamers. The first is Aegon the Conqueror. He had this dream. This is the one that Viserys passes on down to Rhaenyra at the end of episode 1. He has this dream that the Targaryens have to invade Westeros because they have to unite it. They have to rule it because of this great threat coming from the north. So we find out about him. And then we also find out about Viserys, who gets that dream about his son being born with Aegon's Iron Crown and being put on the Iron Throne and all the dragons roaring as one. Now, that is interesting because we've had the first part of it, and George R. R. Martin often does this in terms of application and interpretation. We've had the first part of this, which is he was convinced he understood what this was and therefore pushed to make it happen, but he was wrong. He thought that this was referring to his unborn son Balon, who, as we know, died, and there's tragedy there, and that is the first part of this. The second part is, was this actually referring to something else? Because he explains very clearly this is the most vivid dream he's ever had. There's something to this. Now, had he just misinterpreted it? Is this actually referring to, I don't know, Aegon the second, his son that he's about to have with Alicent, or something else? So what we're looking for from this is, what's the second part? The first part is the tragedy that comes with the misunderstanding of the vision, the dream to start with. The second part of this is the realization of what the truth of it actually was. So that, I think, is where we're going to be going with it. The other thing in terms of the dragon dreams is Aegon's prophecy, this one about having to unite the Seven Kingdoms and having to protect them against the attack from the north. At some point, that dream gets lost. At some point between there and Daenerys at the very end. Daenerys seems not to know about this at all. So it was not passed down to her. Now, did it make its way all the way down there, or was the Dance of the Dragons the thing which ended it? Certainly by the time that we get to the start of A Song of Ice and Fire, that dagger, what we used to think of as the cat's paw dagger, that dagger seems to be nothing. It's just a dagger. So the meaning appears to have been lost by then. Now, are we going to see this? Well, at the moment, Viserys knows this. He's definitely passed it down to Rhaenyra. It's possible that Damon knows, because Damon was an heir for a while, but we haven't had confirmation of that. But we know that all three of those are going to die unnaturally early. Viserys will die thinking he's passed it on. What about Rhaenyra? So, and I should probably just say, in terms of spoilers, I'm not going to spoil anything on the TV show in advance, but I will be talking about what happened in the books. So, depending on how close they stick to the books, there may well be some spoilers in what I say. But going into the future in the Dance of the Dragons, we get Rhaenyra, who probably would have passed this on to her son and heir, who died, and then probably would have passed it on to her next son and heir, who died. And then would she have passed it on to her next? Quite possibly, although at the time they were basically on the run, and he was only 10. So would she have passed it on? Probably. Would her son, who became Aegon III, would he have understood and taken it on board and remembered? Possibly. But we also know that he was, by the time he did become king, he was really quite understandably shell-shocked from all of this war and tragedy and death, and hated everything to do with dragons. No dragon talk is allowed anywhere in the Red Keep. Dragon eggs banned from the Red Keep. He hated all of that. So, and he basically just sort of enclosed himself in his room for a long period of time. So it makes sense that maybe then that was the moment where it got lost. So we've got a couple of these prophecies. It will be interesting to see whether they give us another one. But we have a couple of prophecies, one of which I think is broadly going to be a season 1 prophecy, or the implications of it are going to be season 1. That's Viserys's one. The other one, the one from Aegon the Conqueror, that one, it'll be a matter of, is this going to be passed down? Because if the Targaryens die out, suddenly Rhaenyra might get to the end of her life and think, we're all going to die out, and this information isn't going to be what we have in Fire and Blood. Just imagine the kinds of things that they could do on this show once we've got this prophecy. The dagger seems to be connected to it somehow. Viserys was holding the dagger. It seems to be prophecy written on it or something. We don't know all of the details exactly, but what happens if she's about to die? Does she suddenly realize she's not told her last remaining son about this prophecy? Does she hand the dagger over to him and he doesn't know what it means? Is that how it gets handed on? I don't know. It's the kind of thing the show might do so that we can add a little bit of extra pathos to her death much, much later. Rudy Poo Jenkins, welcome to the members club. Just having a quick flick through the Dusty Wheel. Welcome there, Matt. Great to see you. Dusty Wheel, for those of you who don't know, if you're a fan of the Wheel of Time, the Dusty Wheel is one of the finest channels out there covering the Wheel of Time. I would at some point, I would love to know. Maybe Matt could put it in there if you happen to know when season 2 of the Wheel of Time's happening. My assumption is it's going to be happening at some point after they finished with the Rings of Power, so maybe November or something. But Matt, if you happen to know, I'd love it. It's general knowledge. Please put it in the chat. But please do go and check out the Dusty Wheel. Fantastic show, talking all about the Wheel of Time. And Clueless Fangirl's also in there. Hi there, Helen. Also in the chat. Let's have a quick flick through. Aid Faye saying, do you think the Dragon Dreams and Aegon's Dream change what we know about Summerhall and Rhaegar? Well, the way George R. R. Martin has put this is he calls it, it's now this sprawling thing, he calls it. And he name checks lots of different Targaryens who've got dragon dreams of some kind. We've got Daeron the Dreamer, who appears in the Dunk and Egg stories. We've also got the Damon II Blackfire, who's effectively a Targaryen, also in the Dunk and Egg stories, who gets dragon dreams. And we've got lots of them coming down through time. Maester Aemon as well seems to get dragon dreams. Does this affect what happens at Summerhall? Well, the dragon dreams seem to slowly morph over time and get more specific. By which I mean the first dragon dream we hear of is get out from Valyria. The second dragon dream we hear of is you have to go to Westeros and unite that kingdom. Then we have more dragon dreams which are talking about passing this on. Who's the next in line? What's going to be happening? Then when the dragons are gone, it's about how we get the dragons back. Then when we end up with Daenerys, she's about how we get dragons back. But then she's ultimately getting dreams. When you start reading The Song of Ice and Fire, she has this dragon dream about her flying on dragonback, burning on the ground these ice warriors, or melting these ice warriors. So it's starting to get really quite specific. The wonder has to be, or the question has to be, when we get to things like the tragedy at Summerhall, which is Egg from Dunk and Egg, Aegon V, he was trying to hatch dragon eggs. Now, is that because he had dragon dreams? Is that because his brother had Daeron the Dreamer had dragon dreams and he was pursuing it? We're not sure yet. But this is tied in. This isn't just like a random extra thing. This is all tied in. That's, I think, one of the key things that George R. R. Martin has told us. It's not just that random Targaryens have random dreams. There is a thread that runs through all of these dragon dreams they have. And picking out what that thread is going to be crucial to understanding what the role of the Targaryens is going to be in A Song of Ice and Fire, or theoretically could be. Adi Faye saying it couldn't have got lost if the Maesters wrote it in books. The Maesters, I don't think, have any particular objective or motivation to record this kind of thing. They do not wish to bring dragons back. They do not wish to have magic. They're trying to build a world without magic. So they may well have written it down, but I don't think they're telling anyone. Dusty Wheel has got back this is about Wheel of Time, season 2. This is the first quarter at the earliest, but I highly doubt it. Second quarter of next year seems more likely. So there we go. That's if you're looking forward to... thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. If you're looking forward to the Wheel of Time season 2, then probably second quarter of next year. And let's do a live stream together this year sometime. I can't believe we haven't... I can't believe we've not done one before, actually. Matt is a fine human being and an excellent YouTuber. Let's have a quick flick through. Canon saying, from hearing George talk, it seems like prophetic chasers are going to ruin their lives and destroy all meaningful things, trying to grasp it. Yeah, this is one of the ironies of prophecy. It's not just in George R. R. Martin's world, in lots of types of fantasy, is that if you are trying to fulfill a certain type of prophecy, then that it often evades you. This is how story often works. And so we find this is the tragedy of episode 1. Aegon trying to fulfill prophecy actually brings about tragedy. It's when it gets lost. And so when we get up to A Song of Ice and Fire, you'll find the two key people who are most likely to be the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai Reborn, whatever name you want to put to it, in prophetic terms, being Jon and Daenerys. Neither of them know. Or with this prophetic chain that's gone all the way down through the Targaryen family line, did not reach them in some way. We had an interesting discussion, I think, at the last live stream about the idea of, well, is perhaps this one of the things that was Ned was going to pass on to Jon, this prophecy, so that he inherited this prophecy. Perhaps that's one of the things that Lyanna said, promise me, Ned. Ned has broken promises. It's not just a promise. He didn't just promise to look after Jon and that was it. He has a regret. In his last chapter of his life, he has a regret over broken promises. So there's more than one there. Could this be about not passing on a prophecy? It's possible. Andrew Kay saying Rhaenyra Velaryon may have hinted the Velaryons hadn't married the Targaryens since Valyria in that conversation with Viserys. Do you think House of the Dragon are making that change? I don't recall that exact bit of conversation. I mean, Rhaenyra's mother was a Targaryen and her father was a Velaryon, and there were a few, certainly in George R. R. Martin's world timeline, there were a few of these marriages between the Velaryons and the Targaryens. This probably is a useful point to drop in what I think is one of the key things that we've learned recently from George R. R. Martin, is how he views canon when it comes to the TV show, when it comes to the books. He sort of fudged this issue quite a bit in the past, but he now seems very clear. There's the book canon, which is one thing, and then there's TV show canon, which is another. Now, he sees his role as being twofold in sort of this overview of the TV shows. He's not a showrunner or anything. He's not writing anything. He may write some stuff later, who knows, but he's not writing anything. But he sees himself as having two key roles here. The first key role is to try and make sure that what happens on the TV show is as close as possible to the books. not just this TV show, any other TV shows that are going to be happening. That's his first one. And the second he sees it as important to try and keep all of the different TV shows as close together as possible in terms of lore and background and history. Now, that seems like quite a big job, and he definitely seemed, when Aziz and Ashaya were interviewing him, he definitely seemed very interested by this idea that in the Star Wars world, for example, they have a whole group of people whose job it is to be making sure that everything all fits together, and it was like, oh, I don't have to keep it all in my head, we could have a group of people doing that. Certainly seemed to appeal to him, but at the moment he sees those as his two key roles: making sure that the show lore keeps as close as possible to the book lore, and making sure that the lore in each of the different TV shows that we get, spin-offs that we get, is as close as possible to each other. And just as a sort of a by the way, I'm sure you've all heard this got renewed for season 2. Massive ratings. I think this probably does increase the chances of us getting some more of those spin-offs. If this had been a complete failure, then there's a chance we would have got none or one or something. But the fact that this is now massive, this is HBO's biggest ever series debut. This is the thing that they were hoping. They had to like write a script of how well it would have gone. It would have been something like this. The fandom gets re-energized and excited about it. New people coming in, the biggest new series launch of our entire history, and week 2, the viewing figures are even higher, implying that very strongly that there was positive word of mouth. People watched it, they told other people. So next week, more people are watching, which is very rare. This is very, very rare, incidentally, between episodes 1 and 2 of TV shows. Normally, episode 1 has got all the publicity, people tune in. Some people decide it's not for them, so week 2 it goes down to a low level, and then it sort of like finds its level from there. To actually go up week 1 to week 2, that's something really quite special. So I think the chances of us getting more than one of these other spin-offs is now actually quite high. It's quite possible that they could maybe at the end of the season announce some of these. Some of them do seem to be quite a long way down the process, as in on third, fourth draft of the script. So we'll have to wait and see. But I would now be surprised if we don't get some of them. Let's go to a question from Emma Scheiman saying, this question is from my boyfriend who has never read the books or even seen Game of Thrones. So his perspective is based solely on the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon and my deep dive lore rants. Well, I just have to say, if your relationship is the kind that can happily survive deep dive lore rants about a thing that this other person knows nothing about, then couples goals there. Well done to you. He asked if the scene of Damon sitting on the Iron Throne was meant to imply, this is the first time we see Damon, episode 1, he sat there on the Iron Throne, whether it was meant to imply that he would be a better ruler than Viserys. Our attention is drawn over and over again to Viserys cutting himself on the throne, but Damon sat on the throne, even relaxed and made himself comfortable there without so much as a nick that we can see. Do you think this comparison was intentional by the showrunners, and what do you make of it? Actually, I just remembered it wasn't the first time we see him, but first time he comes into the Red Keep. But was it intentional? Definitely. The main thing I think they're showing is the character of Damon Targaryen. He shouldn't be there. The Kingsguard who accompanies Rhaenyra in basically swears when he's, and Rhaenyra has said, it's okay, I'll deal with it. He should not be sitting on the Iron Throne. But he does, he's insolently there waiting for people to come into the throne room. And what does this tell us? It tells us that he thinks that he's the heir. He thinks this is going to be his throne at some point. And it tells us that he's he's a rule breaker. He doesn't really care what other people think. He'll just do what he wants to do. And so the main thing here is showing us who he is. Is there supposed to be a comparison here with Viserys? Well, yes, definitely. I think Damon, they started off in episodes 1 and 2 very strongly with this. Damon is being put forward as this kind of representation of very Valyrian. He speaks Valyrian often. He gives Rhaenyra the necklace, the Valyrian steel necklace. He's clearly very close with his dragon. He's the archetypal Targaryen in many ways. So he is sort of being set up thematically as this Targaryen archetype, Valyrian archetype. And we can compare that to Viserys, who, yes, he's a Targaryen, but he doesn't ride a dragon at the moment. He's marrying someone who's not of Valyrian heritage. He's a conflict avoider, which is not a very Valyrian or Targaryen kind of attitude. He's not presented as being very Valyrian. The love between the two of them is quite touching and many layered, let's put it that way, but they're deliberately trying to show them to be different. There's another thing as well which I think is deliberate here more. I mean, it might be Ryan Congle who did this. It's a reference across, I think, to Robert's Rebellion, where after he killed the Mad King, Jaime Lannister sits on the Iron Throne waiting to see who's going to come in the front door. He's gone against all of his vows. He's killed the Mad King. He's killed Aerys II, and he wants and sits and waits to see who's going to come in and discover this. Now, that, if you just thought about like the throne they had in Game of Thrones, that wasn't all that much. It was just a chair that happens to be in the throne room. But now you see, actually, he had to actively go all the way up the stairs in order to go and sit on this throne. It tells you a lot about the character, and that tells you when Ned came in, it's not just a matter of, oh, you just sat down. It's just the arrogance of that person. He could have chosen to sit on the bottom step there, but he didn't. He went all the way up to the top and sat there. That's the kind of feel we've got going on. And whether it might be worth a study at some point, but the kind of the feel of Jaime Targaryen and Jaime Lannister and Damon Targaryen at that moment is very similar. Andrew K, just clarifying, I think, about the Velaryon Targaryen marriages. They said something about marrying again, like in Valyria. Yet Aegon I's mother was Valyrian, Jaehaerys I's mother, and others, etc. May just be a dodgy line of dialogue. Yeah, I suspect it probably was just a badly worded bit of dialogue. So, yeah, I shouldn't worry about that one too much. Let's just having a quick flick through, see if there's any more chats. Callie Summers, thank you very much for your donation. Shall we see whether we can get this one up to 2,500, this live stream? That would be absolutely fantastic if we can in terms of donations. Let's go to a question from Chase saying, hey, Robert, been loving Hot D and all the great content. When do you think the older versions of Rhaenyra and Alicent will appear? Time jump perhaps coming the episode after the next, now that the first children are being born. In general, in my opinion, the pacing has been good so far, and the time jumps have been fairly smooth. Hoping for smooth sailing for the rest of the season too. Very excited to see if the Maesters are up to more suspicious things and what other wacky things Damon will do, instead of just admitting he misses his brother. Yeah. So, I mean, to pick up on that last point, this was what was going on in that Dragonstone scene in episode 2. For those who sort of missed it, because it went by quite quickly, that letter that he wrote, which enraged Viserys and Rhaenyra, that just contained quite a lot of lies about Mysaria. Is that he says she's pregnant, and we're going to get married, and I'm going to put the dragon egg in the cradle of my son, and she just like stormed off. And it's like, actually, he just made that up. He just made that up. Why did he make that up? because he wanted to make contact with his family again. And it's almost as if, being a dysfunctional family, he doesn't know how to. He doesn't know. He can't say sorry. He can't reach out and say, hey, can we just like meet up and chat about this? So he goes off and does a ridiculous thing in order to do something that he knows will get contact with them, because choosing that particular dragon egg, the dragon egg that was there set aside for the effort for a day, which was the whole reason why Damon was cast out of court, that was deliberate in order to try and get them there. So it's he really doesn't know how to engage with his feelings. It's quite fascinating. And Matt Smith, the actor, has said that he had long conversations with the showrunners about this, which I think is fantastic. The idea that the actors didn't just come in and just do the thing they were told. They tried to get under the skin of these characters, talking to the showrunners, trying to understand what their motivations were. And they had long conversations, he says, about, did he love his family more or power? And he came to the conclusion that Damon, his version of Damon, not necessarily the version that we get in the book, but his version of Damon did love his family. And that was one of his main motivations. And I think that shows through in this show. Yes, he's still mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Yes, he still does crazy things. Yes, he still wants power. But the love for his family is manifest throughout everything that he's done so far. He accepts what his brother says. He's actively trying to reach out and trying to sort of make contact with them again. You can see the connection he's got with Rhaenyra. So I think that's a fascinating little bit of actor showrunner nuance that they've come up with. In terms of when the time jump is going to appear, so we know that Rhaenyra and Alicent, we've got older actors who will be coming in to play older Rhaenyra and Alicent. And I have to say, by the way, the actors they've got for the younger Rhaenyra and Alicent, I think, are absolutely amazing. I think they've knocked it out of the park. I think they've created particularly, I think Rhaenyra's done brilliantly well, but Alicent, starting to get some sympathy there for her, which in the book absolutely, well, it's almost impossible to get sympathy for Alicent from the book just based on what we're told. But here, suddenly you think of her as being the victim as well, because it's her father who's manipulating her, and she seems to be actively trying to bring Viserys and Rhaenyra back together, mend some hurts. So, yeah, starting to get a hint of sympathy for her, which I never thought would happen. So, anyway, that's by the by. We've got new actors coming in. I think the big time jump is either between 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, probably between 5 and 6. So we've got another 2-3 episodes maybe. The time when it's when we get to this sort of long period is once everybody starts sort of getting settled down with the and having children with the people that they're married to, before suddenly we have this time where lots of people die and everybody remarries somebody else. So that's coming up in 2 or 3 episodes time. In terms of the pacing, I was a little uncertain because there would have to be these time jumps. I was a little bit uncertain about this, but I think so far they've done it very well. I think the key is not to be changing too much each time jump you've got. Now, there will be, as I understand it, we've got between episodes 2 and 3. Episode 3, no spoilers, but episode 3 is 3 years later after episode 2. So there is a time jump there, as there will be, I think, a 10-year time jump in the middle and then another time jump nearer the end. So we get various time jumps. The issue is to just make it clear what's happened in between, and not chopping and changing the characters too much in between. And they seem, so far, this seems to be working quite well. I would agree with you. The pacing is of court intrigue at the moment, rather than we're heading into all-out war. So I agree. I like the pacing so far. What I will be looking for is whether or not the pace picks up during the season as the drumbeat of conflict starts to gather pace, and whether in seasons 2, 3, whatever, it gets even faster when we're actually at war. Because at the moment, yes, there are tensions between different groups and different people, but we're not at this point where they're at loggerheads one with another. So that's the point at which pace probably should pick up in the second half of the season. As for the Maesters, I did a video. I'm just trying to think. I think I've got a question about the Maesters coming up, actually. So I'll talk about the Maesters in a moment. But let's go to just having a quick flick through the chat. Carl Karsnark saying, not interested if Alicent is the baddie right from the start. Got to see everyone start good and then watch them break bad, as it were. Well, yes. I mean, I don't think everyone starts good. I think this is the thing with a lot of George R. R. Martin stuff, particularly Damon. We're supposed to, right from the off, we're supposed to go, okay, so here's a person with layers, particularly with the Gold Cloaks. And there's a discussion about this at the small council. He is brutal on the streets. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. He's rounds up criminals and then he just deals with them in an incredibly brutal and inhumane way. But the flip side of that, we're told, is that he's created order. There was, the streets have been cleaned up. The Gold Cloaks now are actually a fighting force who are proud of who they are. Before they were a bit of a rabble. So in terms of running the city, there's a balance here. So we're invited to see him as being a multi-layered character right from the start. And I think Otto, right from the start, we're also invited to see him as being a little bit Machiavellian. Right from the very beginning, he's there. Oh, get to his daughter. Why don't you go and comfort the king? And he's like, oh, come on, Otto, come on. So I don't think it's all a matter of they're good to start with, and then we see some of their bad. I think some are introduced as bad people. Let's go to a question from Creative Branches saying, would you bless us, dear Robert, with a short history of the Triarchy? I'm happy to. So the Triarchy, this is a subplot. Actually, I'll take a quick sip of water before I go into this. The Triarchy is this subplot which plays through the first 2 episodes. It's kind of like on the fringes. We see it's introduced, it's discussed at the small council. The Triarchy are invading the Stepstones. This is a problem. Corlys wants support. He wants an army. The Stepstones together. We hear about this a lot, but it's never hugely explained what's going on. So to understand the Triarchy, we actually have to start off a couple of 100 years beforehand. So if you go all the way back to the Doom of Valyria. So the Valyrian Freehold had been ruling pretty much all of Essos. Then Doom of Valyria, boom, dragon's gone, Dragon Lord's gone, only the Targaryens survive, they're staying on Dragonstone. So there's this huge gap, geopolitical gap. What happens now? Now, what happens is what is generally called the Century of Blood, which is exactly what it sounds like. Chaos across the entire continent. The big winners of all of this are the Dothraki. What we think of as the Dothraki Sea wasn't always the Dothraki Sea. Yes, there was an area of grassland there in the middle, but there were lots of other cities and cultures all around that area, and the Dothraki just swept across over the course of a century or more, and got rid of all of those. But we have the 9 free cities, which sort of all the way around pretty much the coast. There's 1, 2 inland around the coast of the west of Essos. Now, the 2 biggest are Braavos up at the top, which we know about, and Volantis, which book readers will know about. Tyrion briefly went there, and we saw it on the show Game of Thrones. It's much more big and impressive than it came across there. This is the city that claimed the inheritance of Valyria. They claim that once Valeria's gone, they're now in charge. And so they tried to re-establish this new Valyrian freehold and just went and invaded lots of different people. So they got as far as the area that's known as the Disputed Lands, which is the bit of Essos closest to Dorne. If you imagine Dorne and Essos, the Disputed Lands there. They went in, and there are 3, around the outside of that, there are 3 different cities. Tyr, Mir, Tyrosh, and Lys. And they had always been in conflict with each other in one way or another. And Volantis came in and were attacking one and attacking another and taking one and losing it. And eventually those 3 cities, they said, why don't we team up? Why don't we just put aside our differences for a bit, team up and kick Volantis out? And they did that. It took them a little while, but their combined might for the 3 of them managed to push Volantis out. Now, having done that, they then thought, well, why don't we make this sort of a permanent alliance between the 3? They kept their independence, but they became allies. Now, the 3 of them therefore got called the Triarchy. This was in the year, just double checking, 96 AC. So this is, if you think about the Great Council that started House of the Dragon, that was in the year 101. So a little bit before that, the Triarchy was formed. And although it was sometimes called the Kingdom of the 3 Daughters, it wasn't a kingdom. What they had was this council of 33 magisters, 11 from each of the different cities that would meet up and have these interminably long discussions and eventually sometimes agree some stuff. Each of the cities remained independent, but they agreed that they would have joint policy based on this council. And one of the things that they decided they were going to do was deal with the pirates that were in the Stepstones. Fair enough. So Crabfeeder goes off, leads a force to take the Stepstones. Now, to start with, people like House Velaryon were quite pleased with this because the pirates were really annoying, as you can understand, and Crabfeeder got rid of them. But and then replaced this the pirates stealing stuff from you, replaced it with, well, if you just pay us a little toll, you can get through. And that, okay, fine, it's better than worrying about pilots. But then the little toll became a big toll, and then some of the people that in there with Crabfeeder's army and navy, they would start going back to the sort of the piratical ways, taking a few prisoners off as slaves, destroying a few ships here and there. So that's the point that we get to when Corlys Velaryon is wanting an intervention. So, spoilers for the next 2 or 3 episodes, probably, of House of the Dragon, but Damon and Corlys get together, and although it's quite a long and hard war, they do manage to kill Crabfeeder and then push out all but 2 of the islands they managed to capture. Eventually, Damon, he gets himself crowned King of the Stepstones in the Narrow Sea, and he heads off back. But the Triarchy is still going, but they now hate Damon and they hate Corlys because they had this nice little thing going on there in the Stepstones, and those 2 destroyed it. So when it came to the Dance of the Dragons, and Damon and Cole are on the same team, Team Black. Otto Hightower on Team Green thought, hang on a moment, why don't I try and get the Triarchy onto our side? And so he wrote a letter off and tried to get there. Now, it took them a long time to decide, but they did. They came in on side. And there was a big battle that has lots of implications. I won't go into all the detail of it, but basically the navy, they won in a way, in a manner of speaking, but their navy was largely destroyed and limped back to the three free cities. And from that came recriminations, and one naval commander would, you sent off all of the ships from this city to go off and get destroyed while you saved your ones. Recriminations followed recriminations, and before you know it, the Triarchy just sort of collapsed. Other free cities like Pentos and Bravos then saw the opportunity. They didn't like the extra power that they had as the Triarchy, and then they declared war, and the Triarchy was then pretty much dead. And that was in the year 130. So during the Dance of the Dragons. So that is the 34-year history of the Triarchy. And after that, the disputed lands remained the disputed lands, an area that was disputed between those three cities, and they fought what was largely an endless war between the three of them from that moment on, each of them hiring sellsword companies to fight and gain a little bit of land, and then somebody else would gain a little bit of land. And that is where a lot of the sellsword companies in Essos actually went and earned their stripes. So that's the history of the Triarchy. It's quite an important side story, really, here. In the sort of the greater geopolitical world, this mattered a lot. In Essos, this mattered a lot. But as far as our story is concerned, there are two bits that they come in. The first bit is what we're hearing about now, the war for the Stepstones, Damon and Cole teaming up to take on Crabfeeder. The second is the result of that, when Otto gets them in on the side of Team Green for a short period, but quite an important one. By Carl Kostnak, great to have seen you. Just have quick flick through. Callie Summers saying Damon and Cole get together and it becomes a really hard war. Did I say that? Apologies. Mark Shisa saying, could Lord Hightower, Otto's brother, at any point have called him back and stopped the civil war? Theoretically, but I think that they were all they were bought into this by this point. House Hightower, regardless of whether you buy into this idea of a grand Hightower Maester, maybe even Faith of the Seven conspiracy, even if you don't, the Hightowers have to defend their own, surely. They're a member of House Hightower, they're Hand of the King, the wife of the king, then mother of the new king, is a Hightower. The new king that they're claiming anyway is half Hightower. They can't just sit it out. They have to just say, okay, we'll go for it. And it's probably worth saying, at the outbreak of war, although yes, with hindsight we go far, well, Team Black came in quite strong. It didn't feel like that at the outbreak of war. The reason why, or one of the reasons why Team Green went for it, was that they thought that they had the upper hand. They had King's Landing. They had all of the money that was in King's Landing, so the treasury, effectively. They had the trappings of power, the Iron Throne, the crown. They had Aegon there being anointed in front of the people by the Septon, by the High Septon. They had lots of really big and powerful houses on their side, the Lannisters, the Hightowers. This felt like they were ahead, because at the time, the Team Black didn't even have a toehold on the mainland. They had the two islands, Dragonstone and Driftmark. Until they gained allies, they didn't even have a toehold on the mainland. So it started out looking quite promising for Team Green, but they just didn't quite manage to maximize their initial advantage, is probably the best way. I did a whole series of videos actually on the first part of the Dance of the Dragons, if you're interested in what the book history is of the Dance of the Dragons. So do go and check. I think there's a playlist somewhere if you go and have a look elsewhere. Sword of the Morning asking, which dragon was it that Nettles flew? That was Sheep Stealer. Zain Ahmed Khan saying, hi Robert, big fan of your work, thank you. My question is related to Alicent Hightower. I have not been able to work out her true motivations yet. Also, she seems to be almost disgusted by her father. Why so? Well, her father has basically ordered her to marry a man who is much her senior, who also happens to be the father of her best friend. So I think that's a fair enough reason to sort of not particularly like him, but she does still seem to be doing what he wants her to be doing. In terms of her motivations, in the book, she doesn't come across she comes across as being quite a hard to like character. We don't see inside, we don't see inside her head much, but we do, we see quite how strongly she's there championing her son as king or as heir. Now, in the show, they are trying to give her a much more nuanced position. They said this, I can remember, they said this before even episode 1 aired, and I was really quite suspicious of it, that saying, I think that you will be able to see Alicent and sympathize with Alicent and see a little bit of her her point of view and see things from her side. I think that they're doing that, and they're increasingly going to do that to the extent where when war breaks out, whereas most book readers would go, this is just a coup attempt, full stop. We're all on Team Black. If you read the book, you can't really come to any other conclusion than that. I think the show are going to try and take us to a place where we go, I might not sympathize with Team Green, but I can understand it. I can see where they're coming from. So that's where they're going with this, I think. And a key part of that is for us to see Alicent not as a manipulative mother straight away, but as a manipulated teenager, manipulated by her father. And that puts her into a really awkward situation. We saw at the end of episode 2, she's there, Rhaenyra just like gives her these evils. It's like, what, you so have you been seeing my father behind my back? Is that what's going on here? That puts her in a really awkward position, and we know that she seems quite a gentle spirit, actually, Alicent, on the show. Okay, let's go to well, actually, sort of roughly halfway through the stream, I always try and thank my patrons. Patrons, thank you very much for your support. This is what helps me do what I do. So thank you. If you do want to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There is a link. I think I put it down in the description. If you're watching live, I'm sure one of the moderators will put it wherever the chat is. Larry Q8, do we know why Otto was picked as Hand of the King, as he's not the Warden of Highgarden? The rest of the Hands of the King were either Lords or Wardens. Yes, so this is a really interesting one. So he was made Hand of the King after the Great Council of 101. Now, this is one of those things where how far down the conspiracy rabbit hole do you want to go? The short answer is that he was the second son, and he was an able administrator. Nobody seems to doubt the fact that he was a good good at governance. He could run the country. That's not a problem. It's not that he was inept at it. He was actually quite good at his job. So that's the simple answer. It may be the right answer. If you want to go down the conspiracy route, and I did with History of Westeros, is there a Maester conspiracy in House of the Dragon video, I don't know, about a week ago perhaps, and in that you look at the Great Council of 101 and suddenly you think, how suspicious is this? Because the situation is we get Jaehaerys, the old king, who is reaching the end of his life. He is not as mentally sharp as he used to be. His advisors have all gone. He's lost his wife. He's lost Septon Bath, who was his great advisor. So he's slightly all out at sea. And his heirs have all disappeared for various reasons, most of them dying tragically. And so he's thinking, well, what do I do now? I have a problem now choosing who it is. I'm probably going to have to skip a generation. He does have one more son left who he'd sent off to become a maester, and then actually he'd become an archmaester. He gets summoned to King's Landing and he talks to Jaehaerys. The thinking was that Jaehaerys was going to try and persuade him to give up being a maester and become king. But instead what comes out from this is the idea that Jaehaerys has got, I'll have a great council. Now, the clear implication is that idea came from that meeting with the Archmaester. So, the Maesters suggested to the Great Council. Then we get this gathering of all the lords of the land, and we get told that the people who administered this were the Maesters. There's a vote of some kind. The people who administered this were the Maesters. We're also told they never actually told us the result. They told us who won, but not the actual result. But we hear from Gilbane in Fire and Blood that people were told it was by a margin of more than 20-1. A landslide. This seems quite suspicious to me, because 20-1, that means in excess of 95% of votes went for Viserys. That's the kind of level of support you don't normally get in democracies. You only normally see in dictatorships, over 95%. And then when you look at the breakdown of the people that we know how they voted, clearly the Velaryons voted the other way for Laenor/Rhaenys. They changed it slightly on the TV show. They voted the other way. Plus two of the main houses, the Starks and the Baratheons, both voted that way as well. Plus we've got a whole series of these other mid-ranking houses who we know voted that way. House Celtigar, House Blackwood, the couple of the Manderleys and House Dustin, as well as others, all voted that way. It doesn't feel like over 95%. But the Maesters were in charge of it. The Maesters were the people who decided who won. And so the Maesters suggested it. The Maesters decided on the result. And then what comes out the other end? We have a new hand of the king. Who's that? From the people who sponsor the Maesters. So Otto Hightower was put there, if you follow this conspiracy theory, by the Maesters to be guiding, first of all, the old king, who's not entirely there, and then the new young king, who is actually quite pliable, it has to be said. Viserys seems to have been a good man in many ways, but he was a conflict avoider, and he was very happy for Otto to be running the country most of the time. Let's Kaziglu Bay saying Rhaenys definitely got screwed over. That's certainly the clear implication, and it comes through very strongly, I think, on the show, is that They will never let a woman sit on the Iron Throne. Riley Swarbrick saying, any thoughts on Jaehaerys being in on the Maester conspiracy? It is well known he supported the male claimant. He did support the male claimant. Would he have been in on it? It's possible. The impression we get is that the Jaehaerys at the end of his life, he had, whether it's dementia or something along those lines, he wasn't the person that he used to be. He would Alicent, the first thing that she was doing when she was in King's Landing, she would be there reading him stories and sort of waiting on him, and he got her confused with one of his daughters. So that certainly shows, the evidence seems to suggest that he wasn't actively ruling at that point. So very open to be manipulated. Beesman saying 95% plus when 15% are loyal to the opponent queen is fun. Yeah, indeed. So it doesn't quite, at the very least, it's suspect, even if it's not, we don't have the evidence, but it's at least it's suspect. Let's go with a question from Julia Kendall. And this is one again, I'd love to throw this one to the chat. I'd love to know what people think on this one. I'm wondering your thoughts on the new opening credits. On a second watch, it seems to show us the bloodline and possibly the line of succession relevant to the coming conflict. For example, we see the blood not fill up and move for those who are still currently alive, but we do on episode 2 see Viserys' line go out to the side, signifying the new bloodline or possible succession coming. I thought it was a cool visual and a nod to what is currently happening within the episode, and wondered your thoughts. So, chat, I would love to know in particular what your thoughts are using the same theme song as from Game of Thrones. I'm not 100% sure. I would have loved to have new music, but I mean, it's great. Obviously, it's a great theme tune, but I personally would have loved some new music. But yeah, for those who haven't quite figured it out yet, what this seems to be is to try and show the Targaryen bloodline. This is House of the Dragon. This is something that they're going to be using not just for the Dance of the Dragons, but for different parts of the history of House Targaryen. So the bloodline sort of comes down and then it sort of branches out, and then you see where these things all link up, and basically it's a big family tree. What we will have, I'm pretty sure, is that if we get past this bit with the Dance of the Dragons and then they go back and do one about Aegon's conquest, then we will just have quite a, I mean, they'll have to do some sort of interesting zooming in and out with it, I'm sure, but they won't show us all of that end bit. They'll just show us the beginning bit. So we're there with the bloodline coming down to Aegon and his two sisters and them having their children. So that's what we're going to get. And so this should be in the same way that they slightly changed the Game of Thrones opening credits depending on what was going on. For example, when the White Walkers on the show destroyed a bit of the wall, then when the camera zoomed over the wall on the map there, then a little bit of that was destroyed. And similarly, if a city gets destroyed, then it looks destroyed on the title sequence. So that is that's what they were doing there, and I think they were going to take the same principle for this, which is we should be able to know where we're at in the storyline by where the bloodlines go. Now, this is a lot harder for the casual viewer to sort of see and understand, I think, rather than a map. But for those of us who are deep into this, then this will be quite interesting. So if they do something all the way up to Robert's Rebellion, say, then that bloodline is going to sort of be moving about all over the place until eventually it sort of goes out and then comes back in again. So we've just got this one bloodline which comes down through Aerys II. Kaziglu Bay saying, I think they are trying to create an expanded universe similar to Star Wars or Marvel. Having an overall theme is actually a good idea. Yes, so if that's what they're wanting, I think the interesting thing was if this is just going to be the theme for the Targaryen-y bit, House of the Dragon, or if they were wanting to use that for the other things that they're spin-offs that they're going to be having. Emma Scheinman saying, I feel like the music helps give the sense that we're looking at a similar kind of machine as the one from the Game of Thrones opening. Yep, I think that definitely that's one of the things that they're doing. Carrie Summers, I think it's an interesting opening, but the show doesn't really use the personal sigils on screen, and they're visible so briefly that it only makes sense to people like us who freeze frame it all. Yeah, I agree. So I think it's not as obvious to outside people. West Rosie Ninja, the sigils for all the people in the bloodlines is very unclear. You wouldn't know who they were unless you paused it. Yeah, I think I would agree. People asking about episode 3, it will be out at the same time. It's 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 2 a.m. my time, every week. That's when it's coming out all the way through the run. CJ Bridges, I think that the idea of the opening is cool, but there's no way the average viewer could understand what is going on. It's very confusing unless you know a lot about the Targaryen bloodline. Yeah, I think that that's definitely true. Beesman, the theme song is just to keep Game of Thrones fans watching. New music would be fun, but not much of an issue. So, yeah, I think basically everybody's coming out with the same kind of idea, is that the theme tune is good. And we love the theme tune. The visuals, though, are a bit confusing for anyone who's not as obsessed as perhaps as we are. Okay, let's go to a question from, or I am. I wouldn't wish to say that you are. Donna Daly. Hi, Robert. I've been thinking about the prophecy that the Targaryens would need to be on the throne by the long night. They put a lot of effort into making sure that Dawn was part of the kingdom, but seemingly none into trying to make the land beyond the wall part of the kingdom. This would seem more important to me. Do you have a theory as to why they didn't? Well, we don't know what the prophecy was. Fundamentally, this is where it all comes down to. This is a dream, as we understand it. This is a dream, and then the dream got put into words, and then words got written down somewhere, and then that got passed on, and then that got interpreted. So we're already, by the time we're getting to where we are now, this has been through 3 or 4 different iterations. What was the initial thing? Was it yes, the threat's going to come to the north, but what your role is to unite the 7 kingdoms. That's the most and only important thing that you need to do. In which case, that kind of makes sense of why they didn't go. One of the things that I think is great about these new nuggets of lore and information we're getting is that this is causing the Song of Ice and Fire community to look again at things, to try and draw a few links and threads from passages that we've perhaps ignored before. Now, I've seen Joe Magician, I know, is doing a huge amount of work about this kind of stuff. He's noted a few things like when Jaehaerys went up to Winterfell, he took with him 6 dragons, which seems like a big number of dragons to be taking up there. Yes, 2, fair enough, him and his wife, but do they need the other 4? What was that about? This we know that the Jaehaerys, during the dance, when Jaehaerys went up to Winterfell, there are all these stories. Clearly, something happened. Where these stories some of them might be absolutely made up. The fact, that he fell in love with the bastard sister of the Lord of Winterfell, left some dragon eggs there, lots of different stories, but something clearly happened up there. The relationship between the Targaryens and the North is always slightly standoffish, it has to be said. However much of these little nuggets we get, that they did not take or pay huge amounts of attention to what was going on in the North. Now, one option is that they had, and Matt, J Magician, was saying this on the live stream here a couple of weeks ago, one option is that when the two met, the King of the North, King of Winter, and Aegon the Conqueror met, they had this discussion. Aegon said, I'm here to be protecting the land from a threat from the north. And then Torrhen Stark said, well, that's our job. We've also got prophecies and stuff about needing to protect the north. That's what the job of the Starks is. And then they came to agreement, okay, well, you can stay going and doing that. And I'll kind of leave you to it, and I'll just be uniting the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Is that a conversation that happened? It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Or what Aegon was doing was just doing the thing that he thought he had to do, which was unite the Seven Kingdoms. So those are the options. There are some, like, for example, Aerys II, who did have this idea of building a second wall further up, as you say, claim a bit of extra land to the north of the wall. So some Targaryens have clearly thought about it, but this wasn't a big part of what their aims were. I still think we're missing a bit of information here from George R. R. Martin about what's going on, because with the best will in the world, maybe they had an agreement with the Starks, maybe they did visit there slightly more than we think they did, but they didn't pay much attention to it. They never married into the Starks to ensure that there was a strong bond there. They didn't go and visit it. 3 decades it took Aegon to go as far north as Winterfell. This is not a priority for them. So there is a missing bit of information. Hopefully we will get that. I think it'll be season 2 when we get Jacaerys going up to Winterfell. Hopefully we'll get some more answers then. Kelly Summers, thank you so much for the donation. Yeah, we're on 2,300. If we can get this up to 2,500 at the end of this stream, that would be absolutely fantastic. That puts us on track for 10,000 during the season, which would be amazing if we can get it up to there. So thank you so much if you have already donated, but it's an incredibly worthy cause. Steve Owen, also thank you. All the artsy saying the dragon turned away from flying past the wall 3 times. Is it just the cold, a magical barrier, or what else? Yeah, so this is talking about when Queen Alicent went up there on Silverwing and tried to fly north of the wall, and the dragon wouldn't, just turned back. Now, my best guess, we're not told why, she was very disconcerted by this. This was a thing which she was not expecting. My best guess is it is a magical barrier. We know that it has magic in there. Melisandre talks about how her magic is stronger simply by being next to the wall. We know that Jon seems to, when he's on one side of the wall and Ghost is on the other, that his link with Ghost is effectively broken. So it is a magical barrier of some kind, and it does make sense that a dragon can't cross over it on that basis. So that seems to be it. Simply it's cold, I don't think makes that big a difference, because it would be cold south of the wall as well. So getting up and flying just over a little bit and then coming back. But no, it was refusing to fly anywhere over the wall at all. Keith Reeson saying, so the dragons knew something was foul north of the wall. Again, I think it's more likely that they just couldn't go north of the wall. Michael R. saying, thank you for another wonderful live stream. Thank you very much. I was curious as to whether you think the Jon Snow show might feature Drogon. As a dragon enthusiast, I really hope so. Well, so this is... moving slightly away from House of the Dragon for just one moment. This is an oddity. The Jon Snow spin-off. It's not been greenlit yet. It's still a work in progress. It might not be greenlit. We do not know. What we know is that Kit Harington pitched this direct to George R.R. Martin. He had got in a team of writers and producers, apparently a top team. He's got to develop this idea, and George R.R. Martin clearly liked it enough to sort of say, okay, develop this idea. Now, what might happen? This is different, as I say, to the others, because this is the only one which is in the future from after the end of A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones. All of the rest are based somewhere in the history of Westeros, Essos. So George R. R. Martin can sort of say, how does this match up against my my world, the world, the history that I've created? This, he can't. That's not possible. This is a new story afterwards. So are we okay with that? Does this work well? The kinds of questions we're asking are not, does it fit in with the lore and the history that's written down? The kind of questions we're asking are more, is this a good drama? Does this fit in with the world, that we've got here, that we have built? Does the character of Jon Snow and any other characters they are keeping, does that stay true to who they are? So might we see Drogon? Drogon in TV show lore, and as I say, we now have to be very clear about whether this is TV show lore or book lore. In TV show lore, Drogon survived and flew off east. Who knows to where? Might we see Drogon again? I mean, we could. I don't know where they're going to go with this. My feeling is that George R. R. Martin probably will not want that, because thematically, however this ends in the books, thematically, we have to reach some kind of reconciliation in some way with the forces of ice and fire, because both of them are threatening the world. Yes, suddenly we're thinking Targaryens might well be trying to save us from ice, but dragons themselves can still destroy the world. So the dragon's gone at the end of Song of Ice and Fire, I think, is still quite a good bet. Will he want Drogon to come back? I think probably no, but I think he can be open to these ideas. If it's a good idea, why not run with it? I personally like the idea of a lot more character-driven. What do you do if you have emerged on the other side of all of this as this great hero, as this person who has lost every woman that he's ever loved? He could have been a king. He's turned his back on all of that. There's a lot going on here. And if you can actually turn this into quite a gritty character drama, that, for me, that would be what would work. I don't know. I've literally no idea what was pitched, though. So maybe they will go for something with Drogon. Who knows? Vanessa Law, thank you very much for the donation. Leslie saying, a YouTuber did a great fan fiction of what a season 9 could be. It was really good. Was that Talking Thrones, I think, did that? I didn't actually see it, but I can remember seeing the things sort of popping up on the feed. Catherine Furseth has a question saying, you made a video regarding the alleged Maester conspiracy. So we're coming back to this one, mainly during Viserys' reign. There is certainly room for suspicion that the Maesters wanted to rid Westeros of the Targaryen monarchy. If so, were all Maesters in on it, or just the top guys? It certainly made me wonder about Maester Aemon. I can't see him helping the Maesters get rid of his own house. And if there is evidence, written or otherwise, at the Citadel of this conspiracy, wouldn't there be a chance he could wouldn't there be a chance he could find it? Was he forever an outsider amongst the Maesters? And I think the short answer is, regardless of whether the Maesters were doing something, I think that he was never in a position to find out. The first is that, so he went there as, I think, a 9-year-old. By the age of 19, he was out of the citadel straight away, went to a noble's house to be their maester. So he spent his time training, and presumably as he was training, he didn't have access to sort of the deeper, darker secrets. But the moment he became a maester, he then sort of got sent out. Then he didn't even stay there long. He was only there for like 3 years or something before getting called up to King's Landing. He eventually decided to go to Dragonstone. So again, away from the heart of the maesters. And at that point, after Aegon V became king, he decided to go to the Wall. So he never actually had this time in the Citadel as a sort of a grown man with any kind of rank. So there was no real chance to involve him in this. And I think that the pithy answer to what you're saying, what you're asking here, is that yes, if this is a maester conspiracy, this isn't every maester in the entire continent is in on this. It would have leaked somehow. It will just be the core maesters in the Citadel who are making these kinds of decisions. The last thing I would say is a quote from Archmaester Marwyn in A Song of Ice and Fire, who meets Sam. He's one of the few maesters who's a fan of magic, let's put it that way. And he meets Sam. Sam says, hey, Aemon's dead. And then Marwyn gives these sort of lots of little mini lectures. And he says this: the world the Citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery or prophecy or glass candles, much less for dragons. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the Wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted, no more than I can. So this Archmaester, Marwyn, who we shouldn't take him as being necessarily 100% correct on everything, but here he certainly is of the view that Aemon was kept out. He was excluded from what was going on because he did not fit what the Maester's agenda was for the world, because he was suspect, because he was a Targaryen. So, no, I don't think he was ever a part of that. I think that because we don't see Old Town that much, we don't think of it as being like this hub, but this is the hub of knowledge. This is the hub of the Maesters. And if there is some conspiracy, it's based down there. It's not based out with the Maesters in all of the different places. It's based purely down in Old Town. Morning Throners saying, who is Marwyn? Marwyn the Mage, Archmaester Marwyn. He's a character in the books. He didn't really appear on the show. He only very briefly appears in the books. He's down in Old Town. He's waiting for Sam, who's just arrived down there. He talks to him for a little bit and then heads off to try and meet Daenerys, because he wants to be on Team Daenerys. Question from Mara Lee: what role do you think House Hightower will play, specifically the Hightowers at the Citadel in the show? Will it only be to lend Sir Otto money and men, or do you see them playing a more direct role, especially in the dance? So I think that we will be introduced to the Hightowers more than we are really in the book. In the book, they're just sort of in the background. But the Hightowers are Otto is the extension of the Hightowers. I think we're not going to be seeing him just playing a game on his own. I think we're going to see him as being an extension of the Hightowers. Whether we actually see Old Town and the Hightower and the other Hightowers in action, probably not, at least not in any great detail. Season 1, I don't think they need to be involved. Daeron Targaryen, one of Alicent's children, is sent down there and then gets involved in the second half of the Dance of the Dragons. Basically, one of the battlefields of the dance is that an army from the Hightower and from the southwest, from the Reach, just starts heading towards King's Landing, but moving very, very slowly. that is an important army. Some important battles happen on the way, but it means that they're not staying in Old Town. And if they're not staying in Old Town, we're not going to be seeing huge amounts about it, and we're not going to see huge amounts about the Hightowers, just the couple that we see in King's Landing, and then also in this army heading off. Big money, Walder Dice. Will we see any faceless men during House of the Dragon? Probably not. So the thing with the faceless men is you don't know if you've seen them, but there shouldn't be in the Dance of the Dragons. Although there are lots of murders, it doesn't look as if they are faceless men murders. So you probably, if you've read the book, you probably are immediately thinking about a couple of different murders, but they don't appear to be faceless men. That they did it themselves. George Hutto saying, Robert, do you think we'll see Vhagar in this episode? We've seen aged up Rhaenyra in the preview, and he'll presumably have sea smoke. So maybe we'll see Rhaenyra claim Vhagar. Well, she definitely needs to at some point soon. Vhagar, for those who are unaware, Vhagar is the biggest dragon, the biggest, oldest, most terrifying dragon at the moment, unclaimed. It gets a mention in episode 2 when we see Rhaenyra there talking to Viserys, and she's just, Rhaenyra's a great character, but she just kind of like drops it casually. So where is Vhagar these days? She will become a dragon rider. Will we see her claim Vhagar at some point in the next couple of episodes? Whether we actually see her claim Vhagar or just like ride in on the back of Vhagar, I think possibly the latter. I think the showing people claiming dragons we'll see with Aemond later in the season, but mostly this is going to be with the dragon seeds. That's where they're going to be showing us that kind of thing. Let's Karina Stricker saying, you've raised so much money. Yeah, $2,400. Thank you so much. If we can get this to 2,500, this is Alzheimer's care and research. If you're enjoying the live stream, then, and if you wish to show your gratitude, and if you can afford it, then I would love you to donate to a very, very worthy cause. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth. Was Otto Hightower really planning to rid Westeros of the Targaryens? Was his plan to place his own family close to or in power? His grandsons would be King Aegon II, etc., and viewed as Targaryen kings, continuing that dynasty. There really wouldn't be a Hightower king. So this is where the comparisons we often make between Otto Hightower and Tywin Lannister come in. Because both of them plotted to try and get their daughter married to the heir to the throne, or the king. We get Tywin trying to get Cersei married off to Rhaegar. That gets just, Aerys says no. But Otto manages it. He gets his daughter married to the king. Now, you're right. This means that his grandchildren may sit on the throne, but will not have the Hightower name. But I think they will take that. That's absolutely fine for them. It ties them in. It ties House Hightower in with the throne. In the same way that Tywin was certainly happy in the short term with the fact that his grandchildren were going to be sitting on the Iron Throne. It didn't matter whether they technically were called Lannisters or not. Everybody knew where the power was in that relationship. It did not matter whether they had the surname displayed. That's a problem for next year. You can always change the name if you want to later on, but in the short term, it was a matter of actually getting there. So, did he care? I don't think so. Stannis Baratheon saying, in Deep Geek, what will need to be done to make Aegon II sympathetic in your eyes? Oof. So Aegon II does not come across well. If you've not read the book, Aegon II, so this is Alicent's first son, he does not come across well, and when he dies, pretty much everybody cheers. What would have to happen to make us sympathetic? I don't think that we're going to think of him as a hero. I don't think anything along those lines is going to happen. But what we will see is somebody who's been caught up in something that they did not want. He did not want, in the books, it appears that he had to be persuaded to be king. He was there, he wasn't in the Red Keep at the time, he was out at his revels or wherever it was, and he had to be persuaded. He's saying, this is my half-sister's the heir, not me. So he had to be persuaded. So, first of all, we have a character who does not want this in the first place. Then he's a character who sees horrendous things happen to his family and the people all around him. He gets seriously damaged and hurt to the extent that he can barely move around. He's spent a large period of the Dance of the Dragons. He's actually off his head on Milk of the Poppy. He is a damaged human being. We should have some sympathy for him if they do this well on the show, and I'm absolutely sure they will. The sympathy we should have is not about his actions. It's about, this is not something that he ever wanted, and what he's gone through is beyond that which any human could be reasonably expected to bear. So, okay, maybe not sympathy, but an understanding and empathy there. That it's entirely possible. I think that a lot of characters that from the book we don't instinctively like, we will get to a point where we go, I understand where they're coming from now. They're a grey character, whereas with Thor, whereas before I thought they were just either black or white, but probably quite a dark character. Morning Throne is saying, what do you think about how the change to the show timeline will make the green children younger and closer in age to the black children? How will this affect things? So they've made a few changes. They changed, and I think this is probably the key to the question you're asking. They changed Alicent and Rhaenyra's age gap. In the book, when Alicent married Viserys, she was 18 and Rhaenyra was 9. So their relationship was good. It was close, but it wasn't what we've seen on the screen. They weren't best friends. There's no BFFs going on there. And it's the way we read the story is Rhaenyra, as she was growing up, she understands more and more of this situation. She understands more and more of what's really going on. And that grudge kind of grows within her. So that's how we see it there. But what they've done on the show is by making them friends, when the separations start to happen, it means more, because they used to be a bond between them. That, I think, is going to be a hint to how they're wanting the next generation to work, because the children should be quite similar in ages, which means that when they're fighting, for example, when we get the instance with Aemond, when he's fighting the strong boys, it's not nearly a man against a whole load of small children. It's actually a proper fight. It's quite hardcore. So that, I think, is what they're going to go for. This is it makes people feel more on a level playing field, and it allows. This is a problem they had with Game of Thrones. It's a problem George R. R. Martin had with the books as well. Is that a lot of these characters will end up flying dragons, and that and being quite proactive. And George R. R. Martin in the books often has quite young characters doing these things, which adds a certain pathos, but really to have them as a little bit older does work quite well, I think, in terms of how it appears more visually and how easily we buy into it, because the idea of like 6 and 7 year olds flying around on dragons, okay, this is a magical fantasy world, but it feels, if they're teenagers, we kind of understand it a bit more, I think. Callie Summers saying, I had sympathy for Aegon at the beginning. It didn't take a lot to turn his coin, but it feels like Dany at the end. She had a longer slide, but she started with less privilege. Yeah, so Aegon definitely starts, I mean, all of the Targaryens start with privilege. We're always still looking at the 1%. And this is why, actually, complete digression. There was when they were developing all of these spin-offs from Game of Thrones, there was one show that didn't really seem to get many people excited, which had this kind of working title, I think, of Flea Bottom, and the idea was that this is, let's look at the small folk, the working class people in King's Landing. And I thought that sounds great, because everything we have in Game of Thrones is about the 1%. That's what the stories that we have in the main of Song of Ice and Fire is. The Dance of the Dragons is how the most privileged people fight each other. What about these other spin-off shows? We've got Corlys Velaryon, lord of a great and noble house. We've got Nymeria, a queen. We've got stories about lots of these other, potentially we've got one about Duncan Egg. Egg's going to grow up to become king. This is the top tier of society. I want to see more of the normal folk in this world as well, because I think it's a fantastic world. So I was quite disappointed when that sort of quietly got sidelined. But hopefully, with things like Duncan Egg, we might see a little bit more of it, because they're going around. If Duncan Egg gets pushed forward, I mean, we don't know whether or not which of these things are working well and which aren't. But hopefully we'll see a little bit more of the small folk through that one. Mr. Dryco8 saying, Robert, Crabfeeder seemed to have a pretty bad case of grayscale last episode. We know there's another time jump in episode 3. Can we expect him to be mentally deranged from his condition by the war? Yeah, I talked about this a little bit earlier in the live stream. I think, yeah, so it's a 3-year-ish gap, which you can tell from this by the situation of what's going on. We got baby Aegon there, who's actually no longer a baby. So there's a 3-year gap. Crabfeeder with grayscale will have been getting worse. Yes, it certainly will have been starting to affect his brain, and yes, that will certainly have been affecting how he operates. Andy Q. Hi, Robert. How do you think the relationship between Damon and Rhaenyra will play out? Fire and Blood portrays a strange grooming type relationship, but I'm curious, will the show go down this route or not? It has already shown a close bond and mutual respect between them. I've really enjoyed their scenes together so far in the throne room and the bridge at Dragonstone. Yes, I agree. So in the book, it definitely appears as if Damon, as you say, grooms her. She's a lot younger than him. He sort of keeps on coming back, bringing her gifts. There are all those salacious rumors that Mushroom had that may or may not be true. The show seems to have it as he is her favorite uncle, her only really real uncle, but he's her favorite uncle, and there's a kind of a respect. There's a talking to each other of a level. They talk in Valyrian a lot of the time in a way to exclude other people from their conversation, as if this is who they are, their identity. So how are they going to do this? Is it going to be like the books? I have a feeling probably they are going to shift this so it feels a little bit less seedy. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to do that for the kind of stuff that I mean, I doubt they'll leave it out completely, this whole idea that that Damon showed her the arts of love, or whatever it was that Mushroom was saying. They will have something there, but I think it is as the older she gets, the closer they will become, until by the time we get to, I don't know, episode 6 or whatever, somewhere around there, it feels natural. Of course, these two are going to get together because their bond has been there since the beginning. So I have a feeling they will try and steer a little bit clear of the slightly seedier aspect of that. Can't be 100% sure. But the bond that they have got is something that they've shown to be, from the start, is actually quite a nice one in a way. It's quite weird having Targaryens having a nice connection one with another, but at the moment it seems a bit like that. Let's go with a question from Jacob Roche, or possibly Jacob Roche, saying, "Hi Robert, loving your work, thank you. Just a question about dragon riders. If Corlys Velaryon's bastard kids could become dragon riders, how come the Velaryons were not dragon riders in old Valyria? Was this just a matter of standing or station, or am I being too simplistic here?" You're not being too simplistic. So by the time we get to Corlys Velaryon, the Velaryons and the Targaryens have intermarried a few times. So there is dragon riding genes which come down to Corlys that he can then pass on to his bastard children. So that's why the fact is that George R. R. Martin, I think, is leaving it deliberately vague because it's magical and he likes his magic to be a bit vague. But even if you look at someone like Daenerys, and we think of Daenerys as being the stereotypical Targaryen, if you just have to go back a few generations to see that actually she's at most an 8th Targaryen. That the purity of what they would probably call the purity of the bloodline, which sounds quite sinister when you put it like that. I think it probably is a bit sinister, but that is not as important as you might think. You do not have to be 100% Valyrian in order to be able to ride a dragon, which for book readers, when you think about someone like Quentin Martell, who had all this confidence, hey, I can tame a dragon, he might not have been wrong. He just went about it in the wrong way. So as long as you've got some, you've got a chance. And the exact way that the genetics works, we're not being given to understand. But it seems to be, perhaps, if you've got a good and strong genetic line, then you might just be able to hop onto a dragon and it'll be okay. If it's a little bit more diluted, then perhaps you need to go through. So with Nettles, for example, who we will see surely in season 2, with Nettles, when she created that bond with Sheepstealer, she didn't immediately just go up and try and jump on board and fly around, which is what a lot of the Targaryens seem to do. Literally just claim a dragon, like, right, you're mine, clamber onto it, fly around a bit, and now they've got the dragon bond. Nettles seems to have spent quite a few days slowly gaining the trust of Sheepstealer before attempting to climb on its back. So it's not as important as you might think, but there is some of the right Valyrian genetic inheritance which has come down to him. Question from Zvibo saying, "Hi Robert, well done for keeping up with the videos on both the Rings of the Power, I mostly liked it, and House of the Dragon." Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's hard work, but I'm enjoying doing it, covering two shows at the same time, it means switching my brain quite quickly between the two. My episode, incidentally, on Rings of Power, my episode 2 breakdown video came out just before I went on air here. So if you are interested in that, then perhaps when we finish this, you could go and have a look at that one. In terms of saying I mostly liked it, I did too. I don't know if you've not got around, if you haven't got around to seeing it yet and you are wondering whether to, I would suggest you give it a go. There's, it looks amazing. This is my sort of very high level review. It sounds amazing. The soundtrack is astonishing. You can tell where the gaps are, that they didn't have the rights to bits of Tolkien's legendary important bits like the Silmarillion. So there's a lot of kind of workarounds. If you're a Tolkien lore expert, you will be able to spot that. If you're not, then you probably wouldn't notice at all. Yeah, do let me know. I hope you enjoy it. And as I say, that seems to have been what most people, the sort of the majority view seems to have been, that they mostly liked it and invested enough to want to watch the next episode. So it doesn't, I mean, it's always hard, and I don't like comparing the two, but it doesn't seem to have had the same overwhelming support that House of the Dragon has had. That's been pretty astonishing, I think. But it has been generally pretty favorably received. But anyways, Vibo's saying we're starting to see how the show House of the Dragon is sometimes giving interesting answers or interesting non-answers to the which version is correct issues from Fire and Blood. I love the way they unexpectedly approached things with Damon and Maester last week. Do you have any thoughts as to how the show might approach the Rhaenyra or / Kristen Cole situation? To me, that's always been one of the most perplexing bits of the dance, and one where I'm not sure anything we have at the moment wholly makes sense. Yes, so this is something that comes up a lot. Rhaenyra and Kristen Cole. What happened? Because he starts out being avidly on Rhaenyra's side, then something happens and he's avidly on Alicent's side. The question is what that something is. We've got a few different suggestions in the book Fire and Blood, but as you say, none of them seem to exactly work. So looking at what they've done in the show so far, we've only had 2 episodes, but we've seen the building up of some kind of connection or bond. First of all, he's there at the tourney and he asks for her favor and receives it. Then she's the person who picks him for the Kingsguard. And nobody else really was wanting that or expecting that. They were probably expecting one of the slightly more noble knights to be getting it. But she says, I want somebody who's actually got some fighting experience. So he would probably not expecting to join the Kingsguard, but the fact that he did is down to her. So that's interesting. So he's immediately in her debt a little bit, right from the very start. That's new for the show. That wasn't a George R.R. Martin thing. So he's immediately there. Now, if they carry on with that, they will end up with a point where the two of them are growing closer together. Now, I've long held to this thought that, certainly from what we've seen in the books, the thing that makes the most sense is that she spurned him in some way. Because if Rhaenyra came to him and he said no, is that the kind of thing that would cause this? It's not just like I'm changing sides, I'm now going to be hanging out with this person rather than you. This is absolutely the converted, the zeal of the convert is there with him. He's the person who takes the first decisive action that starts the bloodshed of the Dance of the Dragons. That is what he is, and he is absolutely 100% opposed to Rhaenyra. This is a personal thing. Something she did absolutely just twisted him. So I think it's something that she did to him, not him to her, if that makes sense. And the most likely thing is that he fell in love and she said no. That's book. Are they going to go with that on the TV show? I don't know is the honest answer. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those things. George R. R. Martin has said when he was talking about this before the show aired, he was saying that what the showrunners have done on these issues is sometimes they've gone with one of the solutions. Sometimes they kind of panned away. They did that with if you remember, when Damon was about to give his toast to the heir for a day, and it's left to us to decide, how did he do this? Did he do it in a mocking way? Did he do it in quite a reverential way? We do not know, and it's left to us to decide that. But he said the showrunners also sometimes made up a completely new angle on this. I think this might be one of those ones that they're going to make up a completely new angle because they've got so much wiggle room for it. And it is such a central thing. And I could just imagine a writer coming into this and saying, okay, so we've got this character who completely changed sides halfway through season 1, absolutely flips sides. Something's got to happen. They will think up a scenario. And I think this will be one of those ones that's going to be completely new. I might be wrong on that, but I think this is going to be a completely new one. And I don't think, at the risk of sounding like a cop-out, I don't think we've seen enough yet to know what that might be, because at the moment they're just at the very start of having some kind of a connection between the two of them. Dean Brown saying the Kristen Damon relationship also seemed to be pushed as a thing. Can he support Damon in the future? Yeah, so this is definitely interesting. So they made a lot of that first fight at the tourney between the two of them, and then we get the confrontation at Dragonstone, where Criston Cole kind of like, when Damon gives him the wrong name and Criston Cole corrects him and then sort of says, you may remember me from when I defeated you in the tourney. And then Damon's like, okay, touche. There was almost a sort of an admiration there for someone to say, okay, so that was a good comeback. So, but clearly the sort of the rivalry between the two of them is going to be very clear, particularly if Criston does get close to Rhaenyra, because this is someone who is very important to Damon. His family is incredibly important to him. We were talking about this earlier. So there will be a rivalry there of more than just this person defeated me and humiliated me in a tourney. This is actually, now this person is also getting in the way of one of the few things in life that I hold dear. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee. I've got 2 more questions from my patrons. After this, I will pick up as many questions as I can in the chat. Please, if you can afford it, can we try and get this over 2,500 raised by the end of this live stream? We're at 2,400 and something now. So if you were there thinking, I'm just waiting for the end of the stream before donating, now would be a good time to do that. Mara Lee saying, we know that we will get to see a second season of the show. Yes. What do you think the focus will be at the end of the first season? And what do you think will be, or should be, in your estimation, the focus for the second season? When do you think the second season will drop? Okay, so the focus at the end of the first season. The first season is the build-up to the Dance of the Dragons, the build-up to Civil War. So we will reach a point where war is inevitable. Now, they could find a dramatic endpoint anywhere, the 3 or 4 different dramatic endpoints, but the most likely one, I think, is probably the battle over Shipbreaker Bay. Once one of the Targaryens has been killed, you can't come back from that. So there's that's the dance is about to happen. That is the end point of season 1. Season 2, this really depends on how swiftly they're going to be moving through this. But for me, it's how you move from a position where the Greens appear to be in the best position. They've just taken they've anointed their person king. They've got King's Landing. They've got all the money. They're sending out for support from elsewhere. The blacks are just hiding away on a couple of islands somewhere. How do you get from that to the blacks taking King's Landing? That, I think, for me, is the best arc we could possibly have for season 2. Then you can move in from season 3. Could be, how do you get from this point where the blacks have taken King's Landing to the blacks get kicked out of King's Landing? That would be how, and then I would have season 4 as being all of the aftermath leading up to the Hour of the Wolf. So that would be how I would break down the 2 seasons. In terms of when the second season will drop, we haven't yet been told. We've been told it's been renewed, and we know that they've been doing the writing already, so it's not like they're having to start again from scratch. Filming, we're told, will probably start, conflicting reports, at the end of this year, maybe the beginning of next year. Now, if that's the case, and if they stick to what they did for season 1, which I hope they do, which is a full 10 episodes and long episodes that don't... If we're disappointed about the number of seasons focusing on this, I think we have to keep on reminding ourselves that compared to, say, the early seasons of Game of Thrones, where the average was like 40-something minutes, the average here is 60-something minutes. So we're getting almost 50% more runtime per episode. So a season is nearly like a season and a half of old money. So that's where we're sort of heading with all of this. Which made me completely lose track. So when will the second season drop? So the filming, that means, will take longer. It took pretty much a year first time around, as much as I remember. I think they started in about April and they went all the way through to early February. So it was quite a long shoot. Then they're obviously from February through to August. So that's a goodly chunk again of post-production. I think we're looking at summer of 2024 before we see the second season of House of the Dragon. So I think that we will see that before any other spin-offs happen, though. So even if they announce more spin-offs, I don't think that they will be ready before we get House of the Dragon season 2. And Nick from NJ saying, I know that there are no big bads in the Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Even the others come off as more enigmatic than evil, especially given what we've learnt about their creation. But are the Targaryens the closest fit? They seem well-intentioned disasters, even at their best. Well, well-intentioned disasters at their best is probably a good way of talking about some of the Targaryens, definitely. Are they the baddies? I don't think that George R. R. Martin, as you say, I don't think he wants us to think of the people as the baddies. I also think that he's wanting us to not just think of a house as being all the same or a group of people as being all the same. We have the Maesters who probably share a viewpoint, but we've got Marwyn the Mage who's got a very different viewpoint. We've got the Lannisters who are there in many ways in book 1. They're the big baddies, but then we're also invited to have a bit of a soft spot for Tyrion because George R. R. Martin himself writes him as a character that he really likes. And Jaime, we're initially supposed to dislike, but then when we actually get to understand him a little bit better, then Jaime is a lot more nuanced a character than you might think. So there's I don't think George R. R. Martin has like houses or groups of people that he would say are the big baddies. I'd say the Targaryens are the primary protagonists / antagonists of his world. It's noticeable that whereas he started writing A Song of Ice and Fire with the Starks, and the Starks have our sympathy, and the majority of book 1 is from the Stark perspective, when he actually started writing the background to his world, he wanted to tell us about the Targaryens. Pardon me, he wanted to tell us about the Targaryens, not the Starks. We still, I mean, you can go back just like 2-3 generations from Ned Stark. We don't have the names of the Starks who were there. That's how little he's told us about Stark history compared to Targaryen history. We know the names of all the different Targaryens going back through the ages. So I don't think they're the big bads, but I think that the dragons are held up as one of the two things, the two forces that could destroy the world. It's a matter of will they and can they be prevented from doing so. Now, just having this is the thing, one of the things about the Dance of the Dragons that plays across into Song of Ice and Fire is that this shows us what the world's like when you get more than 3 dragons. 3 dragons are absolute game changers in A Song of Ice and Fire. But what happens when there are 20 dragons out there? Actually, the entire country just gets completely torched. And I hope they show this, because this isn't just the Targaryens killing each other. This is the entire continent ripping itself apart. This many dragons, this many Targaryens is not good for Westeros. So we're almost invited to think in this, well, okay, what if those 3 dragons survive and then they multiply? Is that a world that we want? Maybe Daenerys could control her dragons, maybe not, we'll have to wait and see. But can her descendants control dragons? Will they want to control dragons? This is supposed to be a concern for humanity. The Targaryens, we're supposed to enjoy reading about them, but they are supposed to be a concern. Okay, let's go down, have a quick look in the chat. M down the rabbit hole, thank you very much for the donation. I hugely appreciate it. Dean Brown saying, can't wait for the lads on screen. Yeah, so this is the House Tully, basically. They will be around, not next season, probably not for another season or 2 after that. All the artsy, the end of the dance is horrific. Dragons and armies are blights on the land. Yes, this is a huge theme within George R. R. Martin's world, is who suffers? The small folk suffer. So I hope we will get to see that in some way. Callie Summers, how might dragon dreams be related to green sight or flame visions? Different cultures or religions interpreting the same thing in their own ways, or fundamentally distinct? Well, George R. R. Martin is not, I think we can be very clear now, he's not going to give us a clear-cut, all-encompassing explanation of how magic works. So I don't think it's going to be that easy to say. The green dreams, I think, are, as far as we can tell, a different thing to whatever's happening with the dragons. These come from the Weirwood network, and that is very much attached to Westeros as a continent, as a piece of land. It's almost as if the trees are sucking up what the land is and then passing that on to the people who can read it and hear it and understand it. So that appears to be different. Flame visions, like Melisandre, potentially have the same roots as a lot of what the Targaryen dragon magic is, but they seem to be ending up in a different place. Dany doesn't seem to be able to read what's going on in the flames. This appears to be something which is a skill, but which is magical, but is also a skill that you can be taught and can learn, seeing things in the flames. All the artsies replying to that saying, I like to think the different magic systems are just people tapping into the same thing in different ways, and there's no such thing as actual different gods. Yeah, I mean, my instinct is that magic is just there in George R. R. Martin's world, and people are attacking it from different angles, or tapping into it from different angles. Beesman saying, as George R. R. Martin said, magic should be magic. As soon as you go into details too much, it's just science of a different universe. So for sure, we will not get hard rules or explanations from him. Yep, absolutely. Nick Drum, has a dragon dream ever led to a good result for the dreamer? Well, with Daenerys the Dreamer, it meant that they didn't die in the Doom of Valyria. So that was definitely a good result for them. But obviously that's the moment that you then start trusting in these dreams is the moment that you start getting kicked by them, is my general view. Tyrion had a good quote about that I can't remember off the top of my head. Okay, so I think with that, I will start to draw this one to a close. We've got coming up in less than 2 hours, House of the Dragon episode 3. As normal, what I'll be doing after that is my episode breakdown. That will be appearing hopefully by 4 p.m. Eastern time, within a day of the episode launching. Then there will also be another video. I think what I'm going to do is a video. I was actually writing it before it came on air, about the Iron Throne, which scratches people, which hurts people, which cuts people. We see it happening with Viserys here, and it's often thought to be connected to is the Iron Throne rejecting a king in some way? Is a king or queen unworthy if they're being cut? So I'm just going to try and unpack that a little bit, because if that is the case, then they're trying to show us something with Viserys. It's not just that he's, this is a nasty seat to sit in, and of course everybody will get cut. At the very least, people will believe that if you get cut, then that is an indication of bad things. So that's going to be coming up, and then it'll be back into the Rings of Power when we get to Thursday. So normal Thursday live stream, but that's going to be a pre-show live stream for the Rings of Power. Okay, so thank you so much for moderators. Excellent work as always. Hugely appreciate it. Thank you for all of those who donated. I think we got up to nearly 2,500 today. So let's see whether we can push that on a little bit more with the Rings of Power crew when we get to that on Thursday. Thank you for the excellent questions. Patrons, thank you. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to more of these live streams if you'd like to watch that. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. If you wish to support this channel, that is the best way to do it. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care, and I will see you again soon.